Hey guys, it's jbabs. I am a daytime designer and a nighttime painter, and I am back with another one. Tonight I'll be showing you my process for adjusting a painting when it has already been established. So hopefully you can get some value. Alright, let's jump in. I'm noticing that the forehead is much larger than it should be, and that's partly because this person's wearing a hat, and because they're wearing a hat, and also because there isn't any hair coming up from the sides, it's hard to place your marks. A hairline would typically be some kind of mark to let you know how much proportion the top of the head is to the eyebrow, but because there's no hairline, there's a hat in this case, I realized that I need to then lower the hat to create that hairline that would have otherwise been there if this portrait had hair in there. So when I was here, I was pretty bold. I painted over it, and then you can see that cutting off a good portion of the forehead. And by doing that, it starts to feel a lot less uneasy, because at this stage, the hat it feels very unnatural, which is then making this portrait feel unnatural. But by really sitting the hat on the head and cropping out more parts of it, it starts to feel a little bit more natural. So I've slowed things down a little bit here to give you a chance to really see what I'm doing. And right now I'm creating these perspective lines. In the previous section, you'll see that this canvas was facing the other way, but because I went so long without flipping the canvas, I'm not forced to flip it when it's at this stage, so I can judge the proportions better. And in this case, I'm using the line to judge perspective. Typically, when you have a face, you can think of it as features on the front part being on the same similar plane. Not the same plane, but very similar plane, give or take a few levels. And that's what I'm using the perspective lines in this view for. So, like I said, because the front part of the face is on a plane, that means the lines will be converging, which means the eyes will be converging, and the bridge of the nose and where the lips meet. All of those lines will be converging to a vanishing point. And you can use that as a reference when trying to correct a piece. And in this case, trying to correct the eye level and also the nose level. So here I'm going into my process for fixing those things so that it can give you guys an idea of how I do it. Here I just typically like to paint over previous sections, so that way it's feeling a lot more like I'm trying to work out the piece. I enjoy working out the piece because that's when the painting starts to be a bit more meditative for me. If I'm not working out the piece, I would probably start by drawing in outlines and then filling in the color blocks. But in this way, I start off with very, very loose lines, and then I paint over those lines and use those lines more as guiding markers. And that allows me to work out the painting later on, like in this stage. If something wasn't completely perfect, that's fine. But the act of working it out as I'm painting is when things start to get meditative, because what happens is you're solely focused on this one point, and because you're focused on this one point, all other thoughts start to essentially fade away, and you're in this motion thinking about this one thing for a long period of time. And because it's not necessarily a topic that has a back and forth process. It's more of a subconscious in tune with the painting kind of process, so that you're also not exactly talking to yourself or talking something through your mind, but you're working it out on the piece. And that's exactly why I like to go through this flow of painting over previous sections and essentially sculpting the piece in painting. That's what I'm doing here with the eyes, and I wanted to show what I do when making these types of adjustments. I'm constantly zooming out here. In fast forward motion here, it seems a lot more jarring, but in real time, I'm slowly painting a part of the painting and then zooming out and then taking a look like I did there, and then I'll zoom back in and then continue to apply paint. So that way I can see how sections are working relative to another section. If this was traditional painting, I would apply paint, and then step back, and then come back and apply more paint. Digitally, this is a lot more easier for us, so there's not as much of a barrier. Let's say you're in a painting room with several other painters painting from a model, for example. You're restricted by your position in the room to step back and look at the painting. And sometimes also, if you're sitting down with a canvas in front of you, you might get lazy and not remember to step back, or just get too complacent and then end up with proportions that don't look quite right because you didn't step back enough times. So that's what zooming in and out here lets me do without exerting much motion. Good thing I exercise on the side. Otherwise I'd be sitting down all day. So here you can see I'm applying different color to the piece. I'm brightening sections up. Because everything has been applied uniformly, I'm able to gradually introduce more highlights in areas where they need to be, and then also more shadow and cast shadow in the appropriate areas. It's really at this stage that you start to appreciate what you did earlier in the painting. So all of the foundation that you've laid down in terms of blocking in your color, your values, you can then start to have a bit more freedom to introduce new values without fear of them being completely out of place with the painting. So I continue to blend here, and the technique I use with blending is applying paint and then lightly painting over another color section that's on the canvas. And what that lets me do is create layered levels where a color is strong but then fades out and starts to fade into another color. And then once you've done that, you can use the smudge brush if you want to blend that a bit more in. And that's mimicking a traditional technique where you apply two sections of paint next to each other, but then by slowly painting on top of the other section and then using the bottom section, using its wetness to blend the color that you're now applying. So if you were to have a section and it wasn't fully dry, and you start to paint on top of it, the colors will naturally blend, or the pigments, if you will. And that's a similar sort of approach that I like to take when doing digital painting. There's other approaches. There is airbrushing. There's only using the smudge brush when blending, but this is another thing that helps with that meditative process, because it's very soothing as you continue to try and overlay color and blend them on top of each other and then work out what the colors are supposed to be. It's the closest technique to traditional. So I'm coming to the end of the painting here, and I'm just doing some finishing touches to outline certain edges and get rid of as much line as I can. Although you can see I still left a fair amount of lines in this painting. The reason I did that was just because I felt what I wanted to accomplish with this was done, and the lines in the background wouldn't have added any more value to the piece. And that's essentially it. I hope you're able to get some value. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.